From the Society of American Archivists, student chapter at the University of Alabama, this is Archives and Communities, a podcast highlighting community archiving initiatives and the people behind them.
For today's episode of Archives and Communities, we're speaking with Mark Bell, Senior Digital Researcher at the UK National Archives, focusing in on digital archiving projects like Archangel.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and the UK National Archives.
So I've worked at the National Archives for about 9 years now. My current job title is Senior Digital Researcher, and I came in on a research project. I only intended to stay for a year. It was on probabilistic record linkage. I had a lot of fun with First World War records, and then stayed another year after that. And then the blockchain project came along, and then I've been there several years. And it just keeps, every time I say how long I've been there, it's always a surprise to myself that it's coming on to 10 years next year. So the National Archives are the archive of government in the UK. We've got over 1,000 years worth of history in our archive. Possibly our most famous holding is the Domesday Book, which is like a record of all the land way back in 1067, I think, and we've got everything that government has produced ever since. So all the way from all through all the famous kings and queens of England, everything that they've produced over the centuries, and then we have all the way up to the modern day, where we have a web archive, which is archiving as we speak. There'll be things being produced on the web today, which will be in the archive tomorrow, which is quite exciting. I always find this idea of kind of real-time archiving.
Is it mostly like government documentation and things like that, or do you also have artifacts of things and people that are more on the side of, I guess, like personal belongings?
So we have, so it's mostly paper. I think we've got about 200 kilometers of paper, mostly come from government. We have a mummified rat, which is one of our other most famous holdings, which actually has a story behind it that led to the formation of the Public Record Office. It was used as evidence that we needed a proper archive. You can buy Henry Coles's rat if you want to read more about that. But you can even buy a toy rat in our shop. And we have the odd few artifacts. I think there's a door, which I can't remember the story behind the door. There's all sorts of kind of odd things. But mostly it's government. But then we have there's a project which has been going on a few years called the Prize Papers, which is quite a big transcription project. And it goes back to ships which were captured during wartime, going back a few hundred years, where everything that was on the ship could be kind of claimed, but it had to go through the High Court of Admiralty. And we have bags and bags of personal correspondence. So which would normally never make it into the government archive. It would have normally disappeared. So there's some fascinating kind of personal item, all sorts of things, letters, recipes, just this really kind of rich range of stuff that can be from the very serious government stuff to really kind of quirky things.
You said that you only were intended to be there for a year, which is I think common for a lot of people that find jobs that they like and then they get stuck there and then they're like, I didn't plan to be here this long. Could you tell us a little bit more like about your time there and then that leading into the Archangel project and what the Archangel project is?
Yeah, so I'm quite lucky to be in the research job because I don't come from a kind of academic background, and I worked in another area of government, and then this project on record linkage came along, which was relevant to my work. So that was why I sort of came in thinking, I'm going to learn something about record linkage. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to have a year of studying basically, and then take it back to my old job. But I just got sucked into the archives and all the interesting stuff that got really absorbed into the records. And then once that came along, I got the opportunity to work on the Archangel project. So that was about 2018. I think we eventually started that. So that was a 2-year. I think we got a little bit of an extension on it, if I remember rightly, but it was supposed to be a 2-year project funded by the ESPRC, which is one of our academic funding bodies, and it was in collaboration with Surrey University, the computer vision department of Surrey University, who sort of led the project, the Open Data Institute. Their name tells you everything you need to know about them, and ourselves. And the aim of the project was to explore blockchain technology in the archival context. But because we were one of the main partners was the computer vision department of Surrey University, there was also a kind of machine learning AI link to it as well. Quite big, sort of half the project was about computer vision, but it all linked together, because it sounds like you're just trying to hit technology buzzwords there with AI and blockchain, but it made sense to bring the two together. So we were trying to explore these two technologies, and the main, I suppose, the main thing we're trying to look at is blockchain as a form of ensuring kind of technological trust in digital objects. So just going back to the National Archives, we have 1,000 years of paper. We know how to look after that. We've got shelves, we've got other storage. We can make it available. People can come into the archives, and we have well-trodden processes for taking out a document, looking at it, giving it back, getting advice on it, that kind of thing. Over the past, so we have a 20-year rule in government. Basically means once a document is 20 years old, it should either be deleted or come to the archives. So the materials we're currently taking in, we're in 2003, and we're fully into the digital era, and the digital, where most documents are actually being worked on computers. So that's born digital material, which is offering us very different challenges to the paper record. So if a paper record, it'd be, especially as it gets older, it'd be very difficult for us to doctor a paper record. You would probably be able to tell if it was but a digital object, you could easily, you could think of how easy it is to edit something on a Word document and save it, and it looks exactly the same. There's nothing, there's no obvious visible traits that would give away that had been done. So we have this challenges around scale. So there's a vast quantity of digital documents now starting to come into the archives, and part of our archival process, so we will take the digital document, put it into our archive, and then we're going to make it available to the public. So you're not going to get the original in the same way as you would with a paper document. You're going to get a copy. Now, how do you know that copy is the same? The only way you could tell is to go back to the original, but the original is locked away in a part of the archive that you have no access to. And with images and videos, there's a fair chance we might change the format of the video or image that we make available to you. So we have a archival standard of, I think, JPEG, well, last time I checked was JPEG 2000. A lot of image viewers don't actually easily render JPEG 2000s. It's very much an archival format. So we will give you maybe a JPEG, just a standard JPEG that you can open. That's a different file. So the archival copy is fundamentally different in terms of ones and zeros. It's still the same image. If you look at it, it's the same image, but we can't necessarily prove that without you, again, going back to the archival copy. Or if we have a 4K video, really huge scale, I think we've got some broadcast quality video. They're massive. They're absolutely massive. We can't make those available for download, and probably people wouldn't be able to play them anyway. Again, we would render them as a MP4. It's a different file. So part of what we wanted to explore was, how do we demonstrate that the video that is in a different format is the same video? How do we assure the user of the archive.
I think the hovering issue that we face with the born digital material, especially ones that we are archiving, is it's much easier to prove that a physical document or even a photo or something like that is authentic, even to just a patron, an untrained eye, someone who's not an archivist. With born digital media, it's very hard, especially I think there's that layer to digital literacy there, but there's all of these other things going on and stuff. Even, again, simply file formats or VFX, deepfakes, things like that. Even small alterations to things like a filter put on an iPhone video. And so I think proving that to your patrons is definitely important. But yeah, I mean, the hovering question is, how do you do that?
Yeah, so with something like a Word document or a PDF, and with anything that comes into the archive, we're starting to automate a lot of this process. Is that digital objects will go through an ingestion process. The government departments who send it to us will run software. We have some software called Droid, which is produces metadata, and one of the items of metadata is a cryptographic hash of your file. So that is like a digital fingerprint of your file. It should be unique to any particular file if you're using a modern cryptographic hashing algorithm. So you'll get this unique, very long number, which will represent your file. If we look after that file correctly, if it's preserved well over 20, 50 years, then you should be able to run that same algorithm over that same file and get the same number out. If you change one tiny bit of that file, single character, you'll get a totally different number. And so that's how we can demonstrate that the file that we've archived is the file that we took in. But if I change the format of the file, so change the format of an image from, say, a TIFF file to a JPEG, I've got a different file, and therefore I get a different hash. I don't have to edit the picture, just the file has changed. So now I can't show that they're the same. So that gives us a problem in that we can say we haven't touched anything, but we have touched something. But have we touched it in a way that doesn't change fundamentally the content of the image? So that was one of the challenges we looked to address in the Archangel project. So the Computer Vision Centre at Surrey specialized in what they call content hashes. So this is creating so we're not talking about cryptography now, but we're going to produce a big long number, a fingerprint of an image. And the idea is that if we change that image in a way that just changes the format, so if we change it to a different file format, or if you reduce the dimensions, then it would come out with a not quite identical number, but it would come out with a very similar number. And then you can compare them and say, well, the numbers are almost the same, so that's not changed. Whereas if I changed, say, the face of someone in that image, I should come out with a completely different number at the other end. So you can kind of do it. It's almost a way of doing a kind of comparison to say, well, these are two different images, but they're only different because they're in different formats. If we park the actual blockchain for a little bit longer and say, well, you've done a process, you've done something to it, and you're an archive professional, you are doing something that you do day in, day out, and you're trusted to do that process. If we can publish the fact that you've done that in some way, then we can say this has gone through a verified, trusted process. It's not computational, it's a human process, but this image started like this, and it came out the other end, and the person in the middle is someone we trust to do that. Then you can be transparent about it. If people were questioning, this image, you said you've got this digital fingerprint of the image that you were given, and then you're showing me this different one. Why are they different?
a more detailed audit trail.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So then we come to the blockchain bit. So blockchain, I think it's important to disconnect blockchain from cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrencies have, there's a lot of hype around them, a lot of negative press. There's all sorts of news about scams and the value of these cryptocurrencies going up and down and crashing and making people millionaires and paupers overnight. And that is a sort of implementation of blockchain in the financial world. My introduction to blockchain was actually our digital director who ran a little exercise for us to demonstrate how blockchain worked. And what he got us to do was I think we wrote something on a Post-it note. Someone took a photo of it and then sent it to our little group. And then the first person who opened the email kind of won the prize. So that's so that's part of it, is kind of there's a little competition to win a prize, to kind of verified. So we checked the photo, looked the same as the Post-it note we'd seen, and whoever got there first got a chocolate. So we won a chocolate. Now, so then the next stage was to write something else on another Post-it note, and you take a photo of that one, but you also take a photo of the first photo. So not the first Post-it note. You include the photo of the Post-it note and the new Post-it note number 2, and take a photo of that. And then you kept doing that a few times. So each time you're taking a photo of a Post-it note and a photograph of the previous photo. So the only way you can recreate that last photograph is to recreate the photographs which are kind of embedded in there. And so you'd have to recreate all of the other photographs. And if you were going to be kind of really precise about it, you'd need to recreate all the lighting conditions and any other artifacts, and if the floor might have to, or whatever, wherever you took the photo. So you'd have to recreate those photographs, and that would get really difficult over time to recreate those. So that was how it was demonstrated to us. And we won chocolate along the way, which was an important part. So there's an incentive. We had an incentive for doing it. So if you have that exercise in mind, a blockchain is basically, it's cryptographically based, which makes it difficult to kind of, part of that is to make it difficult to hack, make it difficult to break. And what you do is you have some transactions, which are often financial transactions, but they don't have to be. You have a network of computers, which are ultimately owned by people. So you have a network of people involved in this distributed network. So they could be anywhere in the world. Some transactions happen, and then they get sent, at some point, they get sent to everyone in the network, and people get a chance to verify that the transactions are good and following the rules. And they usually do this by trying to get people to solve some puzzle, which can only be done by brute force in a method. There's no sort of shortcut ways to do it. And whoever gets there first gets the prize, which is like a little bit of commission from the transactions. And then that, what's called a block of transactions, gets sort of sealed up, and that gets written to the blockchain. Everyone gets a copy of that set of transactions. And then the next set of transactions happen. And when they are written, they get a kind of a digital fingerprint of that first set get embedded into it. So that's the same, that's the equivalent of taking a photo of the previous photo. And so what happens over time, you get this chain of transactions. And the only way the last one is built up is dependent on the fingerprints of all the previous ones. So to recreate it, you would have to go back and recreate all of them if you were trying to like fake it. So I actually like to sort of, having just sort of tried to explain the technology, then kind of forget about the technology, forget about cryptography, forget about the technological aspects, and think of it as just a data store for transactions. And all the transactions are in order, they're all in time order. And it has two features. And one is that it's immutable, which means you cannot change anything that has already been written. You can't go back and change anything. And the other thing is that it's distributed, which means lots of people have copies of it.
Okay.
So the one way you can change everything is to go round at least 50% of those people and say, I need to change what I've done, what we've done. We need to go back and change some records, in which case you have to go back to those records, rewrite them, rewrite a new chain, and you need buy-in to do that from
Yeah.
at least half of the network. But the fact that it's all transparent and everyone's got copies means the other half of the network is still going to see you're doing this.
Yes.
You can't do it in secret, right? You're going to have this, you're going to have what they call a fork. You're going to have this branch suddenly where people are going to say, hang on, why is this changed back? So it's not like you can do it in secret. So it's a defense against being able to go back and edit, which is a good feature, but one you have to be very careful of.
So it's like it's this solution to all of the issues that go on, I think, with the digital archives and digital world, and what we're thinking about every day as to how, how is this going to last 20 years from now? How do we keep a document from being edited or hacked or anything like that, or just erased? And it seems like a great solution to that, because now you have this hovering standard of things and all of this collaboration that has to happen for all of the moving parts to work. But at the same time, what if that doesn't happen? Yeah, you've made a mistake somewhere in your blockchain, or you have to create a new one.
Yeah. So going back to our kind of archival process for born digital. So you can give me a file. So say you're a government department, you give me a file, you give me this cryptographic fingerprint, which will be kind of unique to that file. I store that in my archive. I publish that, the checksum we call it, or the hash, so many different words for a digest, hash, fingerprint. We store that, we put that in our catalog, and you can see it. And if you download that file, you could run the same software for generating the hash again, and you could check that the file you've downloaded matches the one in the catalog. And you could do that any time in the future. If you were the government department who created that file, you might have a record of that hash. But if you're just someone who comes to that file after 20 years, how do you know that you can check that hash? You can say, that's right. How do you know that the hash that we've published in our catalog is the same one that it was 20 years ago that was given us by the government department? The only way you know that is because you trust the National Archives.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. And people do trust the National Archives, and they absolutely should, because archivists are good people. They will defend the records till their last breath, and protect the records, so they're not in the business of corrupting records. But no matter how trustworthy we are as a profession, if trust in government institutions breaks down, which it can do, then we need a backup to say, even if you don't trust us, well, here is some evidence in our favor that says we haven't done anything. And that is where the blockchain comes in. We can capture provenance of files, we can record it in, you can get immutable databases, and we can publish things, we can publish an audit trail. But for as long as it's an audit trail that is stored by a central authority and looked after by a central authority, we're marking our own homework, basically. So where the blockchain comes in is we've recorded that same information, but this time we're putting it in this data store, which is can't be updated, but also there are copies all around the world. And it doesn't have to be just copies held by archives. They can be, you could give a copy to, say, transparency advocates, newspapers, trustworthy newspapers. That means it's it becomes very, very, very difficult, almost impossible to actually edit the thing. And then you're being completely open and transparent. We should probably talk about what goes into the blockchain. If we just think of this hash, this hash function, that doesn't tell you anything about the authenticity of the file. what that tells you is that the version that the archive was given has not changed. It doesn't tell you necessarily that it's a trustworthy document. It doesn't tell you anything like that, but it tells you that the archive was given something and the archive has looked after it and not done anything.
How sustainable is even using blockchain as a system like that, as an audit trail? If you don't have all of that buy-in and that collaboration, I mean, does it just not really work in its intended way?
Yeah, so if you have a one-person blockchain, one institution puts their things into a blockchain, you've lost that distributed nature. So they have the only copy. It's a data store, it's immutable, but it's your word against theirs. That
Yeah,
it's
again, going back to auditing yourself isn't really
you can
auditing.
you can just go and rewrite the thing, and
Yeah.
so you need at least a couple of people, a couple of institutions involved. But then, well, if they're considered to be very close friends, then they could equally do the same thing, or we'll change your record if you go and change our record. So you need several institutions who are disconnected enough that you would sort of lose accusations of collaboration. You could even say, well, actually, you need some sort of adversarial actors in there as well. Institutions who are known not to get on, but they're sort of keeping each other honest by not trusting each other. And so you need a lot of actors involved in it to remove those accusations of collusion and collaboration. But to keep it going for a long time, you need that group to stay together a long time, because if they break up, then you're going to lose that distributed nature, that keeping everyone honest. So you need to keep people on that journey and all collaborating and working together on it. Now, I think with this technology, with any technology, you have to have agreement across all of those systems, in all of those IT systems. We've seen this in Ethereum itself, the software of Ethereum. There's something called a hard fork that happened because there were problems in the software, and there's now a classic Ethereum and a sort of second fork of Ethereum, and there's people who are now can't leave classic Ethereum because it's incompatible with the new version of Ethereum. So there's kind of a split in that. I can see that being a real challenge, and in a system that has to kind of, everyone needs to be agreement on the same version, on the same platform across many different institutions with the complexities of institutional IT systems. So I can see that being a big challenge, and I can see something like a migration from one blockchain platform to another. Again, could be tricky because you've gone from this immutable data store, and then you're going to export everything out of that immutable data store and write it from scratch into a new one. So you have to have that, again, you have to have that audit trail to say nothing changed as we transition from one to the next. So there's some real challenges, but I think it's a good thing because it encourages collaboration and working towards mutual benefits as well. What we store in the blockchain, what we might store in the blockchain, is the audit trail. So we don't store the document in there. There's a few reasons for that. One is storage. We'd be publishing all of our documents in public to the world, and there'd be lots of people would have copies of our documents, and that just from a sheer storage and practicality point of view would be bad. But also there's a lot of documents we have which we wouldn't make public. We have documents certainly in our archive, just for even from like data protection point of view, we would close them for 100 years if they contain personal information, say medical information about a person, or even their address. That would be closed for 100 years, so we wouldn't write those things. We have descriptions in our catalog, which are actually, even the description is sensitive information, and so the description is closed. So we can't write the description, and that might even change. We could, I mean, can you imagine having a sensitive piece of information, a piece of information you think is not sensitive, writing it to this immutable public data store, and then realizing that it's
Yeah.
sensitive and shouldn't have written it, it's too late. So you have to be very, very careful. So you can actually only really write very minimal metadata. One is that cryptographic hash. You might put some dates, a catalog reference, something to tie you back to your catalog, something to tie you back to the original so that you can find it again. I mean, if you just put hashes in, then you're going to struggle to make any sense of the content of the blockchain. So it's very minimal. And then you think, well, what do I, if I go through that process of, say, amending reformatting an image for presentation to give access to, well, I've still got this problem of two different hashes. So what I can do is connect those two things together and say, this is the original. You're not going to see that because it's an old format, an obsolete file format, say. We reformatted it to put it into one you can open on your desktop for ease. What we can do is record the process that we went through to convert from one to the other. You could say, well, actually, I've got some computer code that does that reformatting, and I'm going to make that publicly available. And so I can actually record the original, the computer code that does the conversion, and the output, the new version. And I can make that audit trail completely transparent and public. So if there was really, really some contention around the authenticity of an image, you could have an independent auditor come in who's got access to the archive itself, who could verify it without it being public.
I think when you get into discussions like this on blockchain, of course, people kind of get a little scared and they run away because they think cryptocurrency. But really, the bottom line is that same archival thinking of when it gets to the user, how is the user going to react? How are they going to trust the asset itself, but also us in giving it to them? You know, how can we prove all of this and maintain that relationship? Because I think if, you know, like you said earlier, if you dismantle those trusts a little bit, it's kind of a domino system for all of those institutions.
And I think certainly from our perspective, you know, we're a very big archive. We have, I don't know how many kind of terabytes or petabytes of digital material we have in the archive now, but it's going to grow and grow and grow. As I said, we're now looking at 2003. Still got to get through the 2010s and into the 2020s. I saw a figure, and this is from 2018, of there being 5 petabytes of digital material in government. It's massive, and that's the UK. So the US is going to be doing that 10 times scale, and so building in these processes now, but building them in these audit trails into the archival processes, and then adding on that extra layer of transparency is going to be key. Just and for 99.999% of users of the archive of documents, it will all be invisible, and that's probably the most important thing. Is in day-to-day use of the archive, no one should think about cryptographic hashes. But there should be a point when there's something controversial or contentious about a document, you can come back to this thing and say, here's the audit trail.
Where does Archangel in the UK archives, where does that stand today, and kind of what are the future goals and intentions going off of what y'all had intended in the beginning for the project? You said earlier that it really was only meant to be a 2-year project, and that was in 2018, and here we are now in 2023. So do you think that it'll go any further? Do you think that this is a system that is going to get implemented fully?
So it was very much a research project with a sort of 2 years of funding attached to it. We've left it there, but I think it's a thing that we will revisit. I think there's lots of good reasons we've already discussed about building in this audit trail, this immutable audit trail, and then the benefits of the distributed side of it. There's a lot of work on at the National Archives at the moment to redesign. So we have a system called TDR, which is like Transfer Digital Records, which is building that system to get digital records in an automated fashion from government. So we're stepping away from kind of receiving hard drives and that kind of thing. So, and that system is going to be capturing all of this metadata. So that audit trail, that automated audit trail, is starting to happen. The metadata is being generated as the material is kind of dropped through a portal. So that side of it, that is there. And so all that metadata is going to be captured, all those hashes, and there's checks all the way along, right through the digital archiving process. I think we have processes to check the veracity of files periodically throughout their lifetime in the digital archive. So that stuff is, I think, there. I know the digital preservation systems such as Preservica are very interested in the technology as well. So it may be something that kind of starts to be built into digital preservation systems over time. Our partners at Surrey University won a kind of 5-year funding for is it 5 or, yeah, I think it's 5 years, funding for a kind of center of excellence around blockchain. And we were one of their use cases. So we may, I think, over the next couple of years, get involved in that project to look at, again, around provenance. So they're doing a broad brush of lots of industries looking at, so we're just one small part of it. But they were talking, I was involved in a workshop which involved a lot of people from creative industries in the media who are, again, interested in this very similar problem of how do I verify the provenance of a digital asset, such as video, artistic works. How can I demonstrate that this digital asset belongs to that person? And certainly people in the creative industry are, thinking about how to get paid and protect their intellectual property. So there's a lot of parallels there. So I can see it coming back onto the radar again. We're also redesigning our catalog as well, and building in, again, things into our catalog which I don't think we have at the moment is that versioning as well. So we're doing a lot on the back end to really capture the process, and I think that's the thing that is most important. And then the blockchain may be the way you demonstrate the trust at the end of it. But I would say it's worth continuing conversations and experimenting within the archival community to continue looking at some of these challenges around longevity process. Is this the right technology? Do we need to break away from the financial transaction based systems and develop more record keeping centric ledgers? So yeah, I think there's a lot more to think about, and I think it needs the conversations to get people just thinking about these problems and talking about it. Because when we did a lot of user research as well, and when we talked to people who were non-technical archivists, they were like, "Oh, right, okay, well, I can join your trial. I don't really know why this is." And when we talked to the technical people, like software developers and people for the Estonian archives particularly, they said, "Oh yes, of course you're going to do this, because this is the most sensible thing you could do, because it solves a problem that we understand." So taking people on that journey and getting them thinking about it is important.
So do you have any final notes on the Archangel project, on what y'all are doing at the UK archives? And do you especially have any advice for people who are looking to get into jobs that deal specifically with more digital archives, or the technical side of dealing with those things, like getting into research projects on blockchain?
Yeah, I think it's really important to get involved in the digital side, because technology is just everywhere. You can become a developer, you can look at the technical side, but there is so much to do on the non-technical side and the social aspects of all these things. I mean, I do a lot of work in kind of AI as well, and so much of it's actually about the expertise of the people using systems and building them, people who understand the records. And so don't think you have to become a technical person, but have an appreciation, develop an appreciation of the technical aspects. Learn the language, learn not the buzzwords, but the principles of things.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Archives and Communities. We encourage you to take the information discussed today and do your own research on technologies like blockchain and its place in our archives. Information on the UK National Archives, UK Web Archive, University of Surrey, and other additional information will be linked in the description below. Thank you for listening.
This was an episode of Archives and Communities, the official podcast of the SAA student chapter at the University of Alabama. Music by ScanGlobe and Scott Holmes. Opinions expressed in this podcast are not reflective of any particular institution. Thank you for listening, and join us again next time.